Everything feels sodden in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, and beyond. It seems as if the rain has been falling without respite for 6 weeks, and the impact has been devastating. So far, more than 120 people have lost their lives, including at least 50 in a deluge on Monday in an area about 60 kilometers, 37 miles, from Nairobi. This is the wet season, but there has been far more rainfall than what is normally expected, which has been put down to the El Niño weather phenomenon. Rivers and sewers have overflowed. Roads have become waterways, and homes have been destroyed. Flooding in Nairobi is not unusual, but the sheer scale of this year's deluge has exposed longer-term problems with the way the city has developed. You can't contain nature. It doesn't work like that, Professor Alfred Omenya, an urban planning and environment expert, told the BBC. He says that much of the city sits on top the Nairobi River's floodplain, which cuts through the capital. A number of other rivers and streams also flow through Nairobi. A properly developed drainage system may have been able to cope, but as the city has grown over the last century from 100,000 residents to today's 4.5 million, the infrastructure has not kept up. Compounding the problem is that less than half of the residents are connected to a sewage system. In slum areas, open sewers are common, which overflow when it floods. EPA people inspect damaged houses at an area flooded by the Gitathura River water, a day after it overflowed and broke its banks due to heavy rainfall damaging surrounding neighborhoods. In the Mathar slums, Nairobi, Kenya, April 25, 2024. EPA. Slum settlements have been built on marginal land which is prone to flooding. Drains have also become blocked as people dispose of their household rubbish. Open spaces have disappeared as more and more buildings have gone up, both in slums and planned areas. As more concrete covers the earth, there are fewer places to absorb the water, and it runs off, overwhelming the drains and rivers. As a result, the roads have become part of the drainage system, Professor Omenya said. He blames clueless leadership that started from the colonial times. Unplanned settlements have been allowed to develop around the rivers, sometimes disrupting their natural flow. Many of the slum areas in the city, such as Mukuru and Mathar, have been built on marginal land along river valleys. Last Wednesday, the authorities retrieved a dozen bodies of people who had drowned in the Mathar River following heavy rains the previous evening. In the aftermath of the downpour, most of the houses in the area were flooded, with some residents trapped on the roofs of their houses. Upmarket estates were also hit, including some that have not been prone to flooding in the past. The man who runs the city, Nairobi Governor Johnson Sakaja, said the rainfall levels have been very high and blamed the encroachment on the land surrounding the rivers for the flooding crisis. The governor has now suspended approvals for building developments and excavations, but the bigger task might be clearing or improving the slum areas. The government does have a plan to build affordable and decent housing, but past upgrading projects have not met the burgeoning demand. Reuters: a resident tries to clean his house marooned in floodwaters after the Nairobi River burst its banks within the Mathar Valley settlement in Nairobi, Kenya, April 24, 2024. Reuters. People's homes have been caked in mud after water swept through them. In the meantime, residents have been asked to move to higher ground for their own safety. President William Ruto has said that people living in dangerous areas around the country will be moved to land provided by the National Youth Service, while the government plans a long-term solution. He said the military and the national government had been mobilized to work with counties to support those in distress. Neighboring Kiambu County, parts of which are on a river basin and have been affected by the floods, has also announced it will take measures to mitigate the situation, including building inspections. In the past, buildings in and around the city have been demolished as a way to address irregular developments, but often with little effect. Some of developments in the city and its environs have been criticized for impeding the flow of water, which then finds its way to other areas. Construction of buildings on wetlands has also been a big problem. In 2018, the multimillion-dollar South End Mall in Langata and the Ukai Mall in Westlands were demolished as part of a campaign to reclaim wetlands. Now we have many homes built next to rivers so flooded. Walls have collapsed all over. Don't go against nature. It will fight back, Robert Olai, a Nairobi County Assembly legislator, wrote on X, formerly Twitter. Reuters: residents wade through floodwaters after the Nairobi River burst its banks and destroyed their homes within the Mathar Valley settlement in Nairobi, Kenya, April 24, 2024. Reuters. Roads have been turned into waterways. Before the most recent floods, Mr. Sakaja had defended the development of high-rise buildings in some residential areas, saying the only way Nairobi would develop was to build up. His stance had come amid criticism that the developments were straining an already overwhelmed infrastructure. He has now issued a directive stopping all building development approvals until we can review all those that have been issued and are continuing in the city. A number of MPs also criticized the governor over city management, citing the sewage and flooding crisis. Mr. Sakaja has defended himself, saying the criticism was politically motivated. Outspoken Senator Samson Cherargei from the ruling coalition said the governor was not to blame as the problem we are having begun in 1963. You cannot resolve it now. Some of the problems can be traced back to the origins of Nairobi, meaning a place of cool waters in the Maasai language, and the fact that it was not considered a suitable place for large numbers of people to live in. It started as a railway depot under the British colonial authorities in the late 1890s. The engineers who worked on the site called the area a swamp, with soggy land and unsanitary conditions. Years later, colonial official Sir Charles Elliot said Nairobi sat in a depression with a very thin layer of soil or rock. The soil was waterlogged during the greater part of the year. Nevertheless, the city developed into an attractive city with good weather, a lot of greenery, and a national park. But its drainage problem has persisted. An initial master plan by the colonial authorities took into consideration the lay of the land and design measures to prevent disasters. There have been at least 2 other blueprints post-independence to date, but they have mostly not been implemented. This season's floods show that as rainfall could get more intense as a result of climate change, a new plan is urgently needed, Professor Ominya said. But the ordinary city dweller is left mopping up, hoping that the rains subside.